For more discussion about China-Russia military cooperation, we are joined here in the Beijing studio. Mr. Xiyu, Senior Research Fellow from the China Institute of International Studies, and also Professor Wang Yiwei, Director of the Renmin University Institute of International Affairs. Meanwhile, we're also joined from Moscow in Russia, Pavel Felgenhauer, prominent author and expert on Russian military and foreign affairs. Welcome to the three of you, gentlemen. First of all, let's take a look at the content of this joint exercise. Mr. Yang, there have been several descriptions coming from the Chinese side. Let me just read through some of those. Live fire drills, island defense, and also landing operations. According to some media reports, international and particularly, it's called a island seizing operations. What is China having in mind doing that kind of joint military drills with Russia in the South China Sea?
Well, I think this joint drills does not target at any potential flashing points like South China Sea or EC, not about such potential conflict points. However, these drills really reflects the deepened military cooperation. The two military forces or two navies has got a very deep operation in both at technical and strategy. So some of this program of this joint drills reflects compared with the previous drills. This drill showed more substantive nature than before.
Okay, if the substantive is the adjective you would like to use, may I go to Mr. Felgenhauer before I come to Professor Wang here in Beijing? Mr. Felgenhauer, behind the content of the drills, are there any strategic goals between these two countries when it comes to military cooperation? And what are the two countries looking at, aiming at, by doing all of these?
Well, this is an exercise that was going to give experience to the commanding officers on how they can work together, and the men how they can work together if somewhere in the future Russian and Chinese political leaders decide that there is some kind of room for some kind of joint military action, maybe anti-terrorist or peacekeeping. And of course the soldiers and the Navy should be ready and have joint manuals to do that, and that's of course the main thing. It also of course has political repercussions. As far as I know, China has been for some time offering Russia to hold such military exercises down south in the South China Sea. Russia was politely previously declining, but now agreed, and so the Russian naval force appears there in the South China Sea, where Soviet naval power was present in the 70s, in the 90s, based in Cam Ranh Bay in Vietnam, but that was not with China, that was more against China, but now we are with China. This is a demonstration of Russia and China moving closer to being somewhat allies, not just partners.
Oh, somewhat allies. That's a big word. Mr. Wang, Professor Wang here in Beijing, what do you make of it?
Well,
you shrug your shoulder, what does that mean?
we say Chinese foreign policy is independent, non-alliance policy, but definitely our relations with Russia is very typical, strategic, comprehensive partnership, coordinated. Not only in political strategy, but also militarily. This is, I think, to show that China and Russia, both the permanent member of the United Nations, has a great responsibility to peacekeeping, not only in the Eastern China Sea and other things, but also in the South China Sea.
Mr. Yang, what do you think? I mean, knowing very well, I'm sure, the two countries, that others would give different kinds of interpretations to what exactly the good countries are doing now with its naval exercises. Why do they want to do that still?
Well, obviously, no capital between two countries have a plan to forge the bilateral relation as a military alliance. However, they really want, both capital really want to forge the two military forces as a military partner. Partnership is the nature of the two military forces.
What are going to be the nature of this partnership? What would this partnership between China and Russia, when it comes to military, mean for the other players in the region, even beyond the Pacific?
Well, first of all, Russia always regard themselves as a Pacific power, and China, of course, is a Pacific power. The two powers want to make a cooperation to enhance the peace and the stability by all means, including military means, if necessary. So the deeper the military joint drills, deeper and deeper from the years, reflects the cooperation between the two countries is deepened and enhanced, including the military. So in other words, the two countries' diplomatic efforts for the peace and stability will be based on many means, including military means.
Professor Wang, here in Beijing, what do you make of Moscow's recent approaches on different directions? Of course, with China, there has been increasing cooperation over the past few years. Apparently, there's also a ever more eye-catching naval exercise going on. And meanwhile, Moscow has been working with Washington, so-called for a ceasefire in Syria, which has been a big issue, as you may know, for the two countries. And also Russia has been approaching some of the other regional powers in the Asia-Pacific region. What do you make from China's perspective, Russia's different kinds of approaches, all at the same time, including Russia's relationship with Turkey and some of the other key nations, whether it is in the Asia-Pacific region or even beyond?
Well, Russia is the biggest country in the world. It's a Eurasian, there's so many neighbors, either in the Mediterranean seas, in the Indian Ocean, South China Sea, Pacific. They have the interests. They also feel the threat and many challenges everywhere. So the need to do this, we understand that as a big power, and the traditional great power. Russia also enhanced the cooperation with China because no single country, even as big as you cannot meet the challenges to deal with your many stress by yourself, and even United States. But something different between China-Russia cooperation is United States just bilateral alliance. The United States take the leading role, and others just follow. So China and Russia partnership, I think, is more equal, and so that's different kinds of relations with the U.S., Japan's military regime.
Mr. Pavel Felgenhauer, let's just be frank here. I mean, China and Russia have been working together over the past few years very closely, but at the same time, the two have known each other through decades, and there have been ups and downs of that relationship. And it seems that each other knows the other side's nature very well, and that also has led to the conclusion that we all have there's not likely to be any so-called ally relationship. Having said that, though, Mr. Felgenhauer, what do you make of Russia's multiple approaches these days, particularly militarily, with China, with other powers in the Middle East, and also now apparently trying to repair its fences with the United States?
Well, Russia sees the United States kind of globally as not really a partner, it's more of an enemy, sort of. Though that doesn't mean that we are preparing for immediate kind of conflict on different kind of regions. There are serious efforts to find kind of working relationship with the United States in the Middle East to stop the war in Syria, maybe also to some extent in the crisis in Ukraine, though NATO expansion is seen as a very serious threat, missile defense is seen as a serious threat, and in the Pacific region also Russia sees the problems with the United States and is building a defense kind of Pacific Rim from Chukotka to Vladivostok, with the center in the Kuril Islands and the Sea of Okhotsk. So that's kind of, and so it's in these different areas, Russian and Chinese, also of course in Central Asia, stability in Central Asia, Russian and Chinese interests coincide, which is bringing, of course, the two big nations together. It's a very developing partnership, and possibly in the future there could be actually joint action, though that's for the time being just a possibility of the future, since the Russian and Chinese interests are also somewhat compartmentalized to different parts of the Pacific, and so there's a coinciding of interest, and at the same time there are still kind of some differences between the two nations. So it's not an alliance, of course, but it's moving a bit closer, slowly but closer, to a possibility of elements of an alliance.
Interesting. Mr. Yang, two key words coming from Mr. Felgenhauer. One is compartmentalized kinds of shared interest. On the other hand, moving closer to allied kind of relationship. Help us to understand your interpretations of Mr. Felgenhauer's words.
Now we can develop a varied description of China-Russia relationship. However, the common words or the key words, I believe, is a partner. Partly because of the common interests driving the two countries getting closer and closer in all areas, and also partly because of the strategic pressures from the United States. Just look at the current situation. Both China and Russia are facing very serious challenges from in security area from the United States. For example, the anti-missile systems. U.S. is trying to build up anti-missile system both at Atlantic front and Pacific front. So such efforts really make a damage for the global strategic stability that will threat China and Russia's national security.
But the question is, Mr. Yang, will necessarily the U.S. be the bridge builder in a way for China and Russia?
Well, U.S. it seems to me is a sort of broker, a bridge, but in negative way to drive U.S. and China and Russia closer. So besides the common interest driving force, but also because of the negative part, U.S. pressure push China and Russia closer.
Pushing the two countries closely, but it would only be testified whether the relationship is close or not by realities. So let's take a look at some of the issues that are facing China and Russia directly at this moment. The Korean Peninsula, peace and stability. Being two members of the six-party talks, China and Russia, will they be able to do something together? Secondly, with the terrorism that is still be a threat for the region, can the two countries be able to really achieve something together? Not just naval exercises, but really something that is concrete. Professor Wang, what do you think?
Well, I think China-Russia's military partnership, cooperation, is not just a response to so-called U.S. pivot back to Asia or unilateralism. I think the two permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, they work together to provide security public goods for the world. It's their responsibility. It's not just rely on the United States or its airlines to do this. So, both China and Russia, not just work bilaterally, but also they are seeking the opportunities to work together with United States even, in Iran nuclear issues, in North Korea nuclear issues, but in different ways, in different levels. In the Korean Peninsula, I think China and Russia work together to guarantee that the United States cannot use force to overthrow North Korea regime. This, they declared many times that North Korea felt the threat. Without their support, backup, I think maybe something happened before, like what happened in Iraq, in Libya. But now it may be difficult because North Korea has nuclear weapons. For the anti-terror, China and Russia are two founding members of the SCO, anti-three evils. This is major jobs of the SCO. Without SCO, the only military from the maritime, the Americans bilateral alliance is unstable. So both continental and maritime, we need more international organizations. But now, based on the SCO, we are thinking maybe there's a new framework of the Asia Pacific combined with the Euro-Asian. But China and Russia proposed this for many years. But so far, unfortunately, United States, for other considerations and also positive response.
I see. Mr. Yang, what do you think about the earlier realities that China and Russia, if they want to be together, needs to face? And also the fact that the strategic choice that China sometimes needs to make as to who to work with on what occasion, about what?
I think that would be very sophisticated relationship between the two big powers. On one hand, as I mentioned, they are getting closer and closer, both strategically and technically. But on the other hand, both Russia and China will strongly insist on their respective independence. Both of the powers are independent powers. That's the basic reason why the two great countries will never get the so-called alliance. Because in the current international relations, there's no equal footing alliance. So whenever, for example, whenever Japan and the USA, we are partner, but I would say unequal partner. So only now it's a very unique. Only China and Russia partnership is based on equal footing, partly because of the so-called independent diplomacy. Because besides the closer and closer ties with each other, both China and Russia also engage with the many other powers, including engage with United States independently.
I see. Mr. Felgenhauer, you've been listening to the other two panelists. What do you make eventually of what you consider as appropriate strategic choices for Moscow?
I believe that this is going to be a very important step, this what's happening right now in the South China Sea, because it's a real important step for Russia and China. It's bringing the two countries much closer together in a very important time, and that is, of course, and it will have, though it won't have long-term in itself strategic repercussions, this exercise. It's a one-time kind of event. It's not that Russia is moving militarily into having a permanent presence in the South China Sea. But this is an important step in further and much more closer cooperation, military cooperation between China and Russia. So this is, of course, a very important event happening right now.